I've always thought of myself as the strong one. Not in the way that people lift weights or run marathons, but in the quiet way. The kind of strong that holds a family together, that remembers every birthday, that stays calm when things fall apart. I raised 2 kids, cared for my mother until her final breath, juggled a job, a house, a marriage. I did it all. And I thought, foolishly maybe, that the hardest parts of life were behind me. But when I turned 51, something shifted. First it was subtle. A little fatigue here and there, a night of restless sleep. I blamed it on work stress or maybe hormones out of balance. I was used to running on empty. It was practically my default. But this time it didn't pass. I started waking up in the middle of the night. Not just once, not just for a glass of water or to use the bathroom. I would wake up with a start, heart pounding, skin damp with sweat, chest tight as if someone had tied a rope around me. The air felt too thin. The silence of the house too loud. I'd lie there, eyes open in the dark, thoughts racing like I was late for something I couldn't name. And then came the tears. They would arrive unannounced. In the car, at work, standing in line at the pharmacy. I'd feel my throat tighten, my eyes sting, and before I could stop it, tears. Real ones. Streaming down my face while people politely looked away. I didn't even know what I was crying about. Nothing had happened. And yet everything felt wrong. I remember one afternoon vividly. I was in my car, parked outside the grocery store. I had my list in hand, bread, milk, bananas, and no energy to get out. I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, wondering if I was broken. That was the word that came to mind. Broken. Like someone had cracked me open and rearranged my insides without telling me. My husband noticed it first. "You're not yourself lately," he said over dinner one night. I was quiet. "What's going on with you?" he asked. "You snap at me, you cry for no reason. I don't know how to help you." Neither did I. And that scared me more than anything. I tried to explain it once. I told him it was like I was standing just outside of myself, watching someone else live my life, but not being able to get back inside my own skin. He didn't understand. How could he? Even I didn't understand. The smallest things became too much. I'd forget appointments, lose my phone, walk into a room and forget why. My daughter teased me about it. Mum's finally turning into Nan. But behind the jokes, I saw the concern in her eyes. And in mine, the reflection of someone I didn't recognize. The scariest moment came in the supermarket. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the bananas were on sale. I was in the checkout line holding a basket when it hit me, like a wave crashing in from nowhere. My heart started racing, palms sweating, a whooshing sound in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I looked around and the whole world tilted just a little. I grabbed the edge of the shelf to steady myself, certain I was having a heart attack. Or worse, maybe a stroke. Maybe this was it. A woman behind me noticed. She placed a gentle hand on my arm and asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded. But inside I was screaming. I went to the doctor that week. Sat in the waiting room with a list of symptoms scribbled on a crumpled notepad. Insomnia, anxiety, night sweats, mood swings, forgetfulness, weight gain. I felt ridiculous. Like a hypochondriac. Like someone who needed attention, not a diagnosis. When the doctor called me in, I expected him to run tests, maybe refer me to a neurologist or psychiatrist. I braced for the worst. Instead he listened, quietly, kindly, and then smiled gently. He said, "It's menopause." Just like that. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Maybe it was. But for me it felt like I'd been wandering in the dark for years. And someone finally flipped on a light. I blinked. "Wait. This is menopause?" He nodded. "Yes. And everything you're describing, everything, is completely normal. Difficult, yes. But normal." I stared at him, stunned. I wasn't dying. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. That moment changed everything. Not because my symptoms disappeared, no they didn't, but because now I had a name for the storm. And when you can name something you can start to face it. I left the clinic with a pamphlet clutched in my hand and 1,000 thoughts swirling in my head. I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. It was raining. The kind of soft drizzle that paints the windshield gray. I turned on the wipers. And for the first time in months, I breathed. A real deep breath. Because now I knew. This wasn't the end of me. It was just a different beginning. Knowing it was menopause gave me a strange kind of peace. But it didn't make the symptoms disappear. Naming the storm didn't stop the thunder. It just meant I could stop pretending I wasn't getting wet. After the diagnosis, I started reading. At night, while everyone else slept, I sat in the dim kitchen light, scrolling through articles and forums. Hot flashes, vaginal dryness, loss of libido, brain fog. Terms I had never taken seriously before now appeared in bold on every page. It was like unlocking a secret library, one filled with stories that sounded exactly like mine. Women confessing they no longer recognized their own bodies. Women who couldn't sleep, who forgot their own birthdays, who snapped at their partners for no reason, then sobbed in the bathroom afterwards. Some talked about rage. Others talked about shame. All of them talked about feeling alone. And I realized I wasn't. There were thousands of us. Maybe millions. Sitting in quiet kitchens Googling the same things. Whispering into the void. Is this normal? Am I broken? I wasn't broken. I was just unprepared. No one told me menopause could feel like this. They told me about the hot flashes. Yes. But no one told me it might feel like grief. Grief for the old version of myself. Grief for the body I used to understand. There was no funeral, no farewell. One day I woke up and she was gone. At work I struggled to concentrate. I would stare at the computer screen, reading the same sentence over and over again, not absorbing a word. Sometimes I couldn't remember a colleague's name, someone I had worked with for years. Once I left my car keys in the fridge. Another time I forgot my PIN at the ATM and walked away empty-handed, ashamed. It was like my brain had developed holes. And I didn't want to talk about it. Not to my husband, not to my friends. Because it wasn't just a physical shift. It felt like a failure. Like I was slipping away. But I couldn't hide forever. So I made a quiet decision. I would treat this transition like any other life phase. Awkward, unpredictable, and sometimes painful. But survivable. I started small. A morning walk. 10 minutes, nothing fancy, just around the block before coffee. The first few times I felt silly. What was I even doing? But after a week, I noticed I wasn't dreading the day as much. Then came food. I stopped eating toast for dinner. Started cooking again, even simple meals. I added greens. Cut back on sugar. Drank more water. It didn't cure me, but I felt less foggy. I also stopped pretending I wasn't tired. If I needed to nap at 3 p.m. I did. If I wanted to go to bed early I did. And one afternoon, after another restless night, I looked in the mirror and said, I'm proud of you. It felt awkward. But necessary. I also downloaded a menopause tracker app. I logged my sleep, mood, temperature, and cycle, or rather the lack of one. Patterns began to emerge. I noticed the days I felt worst often followed caffeine, poor sleep, or high stress. It wasn't a cure, but it was awareness. And that mattered more than I expected. Of course, there were still hard days. Days when I felt like my skin was too tight. When my bra pinched and my patience was shorter than a matchstick. Days I couldn't find a single thing in my closet that felt right on my new, softer body. Days I missed the old me so much I wanted to scream. But those days were balanced by better ones. Ones where I remembered to laugh. Where my daughter hugged me longer than usual. Where my husband kissed my forehead and said, You're still beautiful, you know that? It wasn't about going back. It was about learning how to go forward. Differently. I wasn't the woman I used to be. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Maybe I was becoming someone wiser. Someone more honest. Someone who no longer faked being fine, just to make others comfortable. One night I sat down and wrote a list. Things I've lost. My cycle. My tolerance for nonsense. My ability to sleep like a teenager. Things I've gained. Self-awareness. Permission to rest. A quiet kind of courage. It wasn't a fair trade. But it wasn't worthless either. Menopause didn't ruin me. It revealed me. The version of me who was waiting underneath the expectations, the performance, the fear of aging. Now I talk about it. Not always easily. Not always loudly. But when a friend whispers to me, I think I'm going through something. I don't look away. I say, me too. Let's talk. Because the silence around menopause is more painful than the symptoms. And stories, our stories, are how we break that silence. Menopause didn't just change my body. It changed the way people looked at me. Or maybe, the way I believed they looked at me. There was a moment, small, unremarkable, when it first hit me. My husband had come home from work, walked past me in the kitchen and kissed the top of my head. It was gentle, familiar. But something inside me shattered. He hadn't really looked at me. Not in that seeing me kind of way. And truthfully, I hadn't looked at myself in months. I knew he was trying. He asked how I was feeling, offered to make tea, reminded me to rest. But he didn't know who he was talking to anymore. And honestly, neither did I. There was a quiet space between us. Not angry. Not cold. Just distant. Like we were two ships passing in fog, waving silently, not sure how to dock anymore. Sex had become complicated. Not because he was unkind, he was gentle, patient. But my body had changed. Desire flickered and vanished like a candle in the wind. Touch felt like pressure. Kisses became obligations. And worse, I couldn't explain why. I avoided him. Not because I didn't love him, but because I didn't love myself in this new version. The softness around my stomach, the night sweats, the unpredictable moods. I felt broken, and I couldn't ask him to desire someone who didn't even desire herself. He asked me once, "Is it me?" And I cried. Not because it was him, but because it wasn't. It was everything I didn't know how to say. I sat down one evening and tried to speak the words that had been stuck behind my teeth for months. "It's not you," I whispered. "I don't know what's happening to me. Some days I feel too much. Some days I feel nothing. I don't know what to do with that." He took my hand. That quiet kind of holding that doesn't demand or explain. Just presence. That night we didn't fix anything. But for the first time in weeks we stopped drifting. My daughter too had started to notice. At 23 she was full of opinions and independence. She didn't understand why I was moody, distant, always tired. One morning she snapped at me. "Mom, you're not even listening anymore. You're always somewhere else." And she wasn't wrong. I had become quieter, slower to respond. Half of me was still trying to remember what I walked into the room for. The other half was simply trying not to cry. Later that evening I went into her room. She looked up, eyes wary. I said, "I'm sorry." She blinked. "I'm not okay," I continued. "But it's not about you. My body is changing. And it's taking my mind and heart along with it. I don't always know how to be your mom right now. But I love you even when I'm quiet." She was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, "I didn't know." I nodded. Neither did I. We both laughed through the tears. And in that shared softness something cracked open. Why is it that the people closest to us get the least explanation? Maybe because we assume they already understand. Or maybe because vulnerability is hardest with those whose opinions matter most. I started writing things down. Things I couldn't say out loud. Letters to my younger self. To my husband. To my daughter. To my body. One night I wrote, "Dear body, I miss the way we used to be. But thank you for staying even when I didn't recognize you." The truth is, menopause doesn't just change hormones. It changes identity. You become less mother, less wife, less nurturer. At least in the ways the world defines them. And in the silence you must redefine yourself. I began to ask for help. Not in big dramatic ways. But softly. "Can you hold me without fixing me? Can you sit with me even if I'm quiet? Can you love this version of me even if I'm still learning how to?" To my surprise, they did. It wasn't always perfect. There were still misunderstandings. Still awkward dinners and unspoken hurts. But there was also grace. Because once you stop pretending to be okay, you give the people around you permission to love you as you are. Menopause didn't just challenge my relationships. It deepened them. By stripping away my certainty, it made room for honesty. By forcing me inward, it reminded me to reach outward again. And somehow, in the messy middle of all this, we found each other again. Not the same, but real. For months I had avoided mirrors. Not just the big ones in the bedroom, but the small, accidental ones. The toaster reflection, the glass doors at work, the shop windows that caught you off guard. There was a version of me in those reflections that I didn't recognize. Her shoulders slouched. Her eyes looked tired. Her body, unfamiliar. Not bad. Not ugly. Just different. Softer in some places. Wider in others. The sharpness I once clung to had blurred into something gentler. And I didn't know what to do with her. I used to dress quickly, carelessly even. Jeans top go. But now, every morning became a quiet battle. Some days nothing fit right. Other days everything itched. Even fabric I'd worn for years suddenly felt wrong. Too tight. Too loud. Too young. I'd pull on a sweater, look in the mirror and think, is this who I am now? And the answer for a long time was, I don't know. But one morning something shifted. I was brushing my teeth when I caught my reflection, half asleep, hair tousled, no makeup. And I paused. Not to criticize, but to notice. There was something raw, yes, but also something real. My face was fuller. My skin had new lines. But there was a softness in my eyes I hadn't seen in years. Compassion. I think that's what it was. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered to myself, you've carried so much. And you're still standing. It wasn't a grand transformation. I didn't suddenly love every inch of my body or skip through the hallway in celebration. But it was a beginning. That day I made myself a promise. I would stop speaking to myself in ways I'd never speak to someone I love. So I started small. I bought one shirt that fit comfortably. Not because it was trendy but because it made me feel calm. I wore it like armor. Not to impress but to soothe. I changed the way I moved too. Not with force or guilt but with curiosity. I began stretching in the mornings. 5 minutes on the living room rug. I didn't call it exercise. I called it checking in. How do my hips feel today? Are my shoulders tight? What does my breath sound like when I'm not rushing? And then came food. Not a diet. Not punishment. I just started noticing what made me feel good. A warm bowl of oats with cinnamon. A boiled egg. A piece of dark chocolate at 3 p.m., not earned, just enjoyed. The war with my body had gone on long enough. Now I wanted peace. I started writing again. Not pages and pages, just a few lines each night. Things I was grateful for. Things that hurt. Moments that made me feel like me. One night I wrote, today I laughed with my daughter in the car. I looked at her and realized she's becoming someone I truly admire. Maybe I'm becoming someone she can admire too. That was new. Not just tolerating this season of life, but seeing the quiet beauty in it. I began listening to music again. Real music, not just what played in the background of chores. I danced once alone in the kitchen. It was 9:30 p.m. The dishwasher was running. And I twirled slowly to a song I hadn't heard in years. My husband walked in and froze. I laughed. He smiled. And in that moment I didn't feel old or invisible. I felt alive. Was it perfect? No. I still had hot flashes that woke me at 2 a.m. Still forgot words mid-sentence. Still cried during laundry for no clear reason. But now I met those moments with less fear. Less shame. Because I was no longer pretending. No longer trying to get back to who I was before. I was becoming someone else. Someone honest. Someone gentle. Someone who didn't need to be perfect to be whole. And the woman in the mirror? She wasn't the same. But she was mine. And I was learning to love her. It happened on a Tuesday. A normal, uneventful, quiet Tuesday. I was reaching for a box of mugs on the top shelf in the kitchen, something I'd done 100 times before. But this time something slipped. My footing, my grip, maybe just my luck. And in a second I was on the floor. The fall wasn't dramatic. No ambulance, no sirens. Just a dull thud, a crack in the ceramic and a sharper one in my wrist. The doctor said it was a small fracture. I'd be fine. But what he didn't see, what no one did, was how the smallest break had let everything inside me spill out. For the first time in a long time I couldn't do anything for myself. Not open jars. Not type properly. Not wash my hair the way I liked it. And something inside me snapped. Not in the physical way but in the soul way. I sat on the edge of the tub that night, left hand awkwardly bandaged, and wept. Not just for the fall. Not even for the pain. But for the months, maybe years I had pushed through without stopping. I had weathered hot flashes, insomnia, emotional whirlwinds, and an identity crisis. And still cooked dinner, folded laundry, smiled through conversations I didn't have energy for. This stupid risk, this silly fall, was the first time life forced me to stop. And in that stillness I saw what I'd been afraid to admit. I was exhausted. Not just physically but soul deep. I wasn't mourning the woman I used to be. I was mourning the permission I never gave myself to change. For years I'd clung to the image of who I was supposed to be. Energetic. Patient. Attractive. Youthful. But that woman. She had quietly slipped away. And I kept trying to drag her back like a ghost I refused to let rest. That night, in the silence of my bathroom, I whispered, "Hey." I let her go. And something lifted. In the days that followed, people offered help. My daughter washed my hair for me. My husband brought me coffee just the way I like it. My coworker covered my shift without me even asking. And for once I let them. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't rush to say, I'm fine. Because I wasn't fine. And that was okay. What surprised me most wasn't how much support I received, but how much beauty I found in being cared for. There is grace in allowing others to hold us. There is dignity in surrender when it's rooted in truth. And in that softness, something inside me began to rebuild. Not the old scaffolding. Not the image of perfect womanhood I'd inherited. But something slower, stronger, wiser. I started saying no. To the things that drained me. To the events that no longer fed me. To the version of me that existed only to please others. I also started saying yes. Yes to rest. Yes to joy. Yes to help. I read a poem one afternoon that said, "Midlife is not a crisis. It is a revolution." And I felt that in my bones. Menopause wasn't the problem. It was the unveiling. All my life I had measured myself by what I gave, what I produced, what I endured. But now, in this quieter chapter, I was learning to measure by something else. By how honestly I lived. By how softly I spoke to myself. By how deeply I listened to what my body whispered. I wasn't falling apart. I was falling into place. One evening, weeks after the fall, I stood outside just as the sun began to set. The sky was a bruised peach color, soft and swollen with light. I held my cup of tea in my non-dominant hand, clumsily but proudly. And I smiled. Not because everything was easy, but because, for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to outrun who I was becoming. I stood still. And it was enough. I turned 52 quietly. No big party. No candles to blow out. Just a slice of cake, a soft cardigan, and the people I love around the table. It was enough. More than enough. I remember sitting there watching them talk and laugh, their voices gently overlapping, and feeling this calm wash over me. Not happiness exactly. Something deeper. Like peace. The kind that comes when you're no longer trying to prove anything. When you're no longer chasing versions of yourself that belonged to a different decade. This birthday felt different. Not because of the number, but because of who I was becoming inside it. I didn't wear makeup that day. Didn't straighten my hair. I wore soft socks and let myself be as I was. Loose, warm, quiet. And no part of me felt lacking. It had taken so long to get here. Years of ignoring my own needs. Years of living in service to roles. Mother, wife, daughter, coworker, friend. But now I could be a woman first. Not defined by service. Not reduced by age. Not hidden behind what I used to look like or how much I used to give. Just me. Breathing. Changing. Alive. I wish someone had told me that this could be beautiful. That menopause isn't just hot flashes and night sweats. It's not just forgetting words or waking up angry. It's also a softening. A letting go. A kind of coming home to yourself. Yes, there is grief. But there is also birth. Yes, there is confusion. But there is also clarity. There is a point somewhere in the middle of it all. When you realize you're not falling apart. You're unfolding. I've started doing things just for me again. Not for praise. Not to be useful. But for joy. I go for walks without my phone. I sit in the park and watch the trees move. I light a candle just because the room feels quiet. I have conversations with women I never used to speak to. Older women, younger women, women in waiting rooms, in grocery stores, online forums. And we share something unspoken, something deep. This knowing. This me too, that bridges decades and backgrounds. I write more now. Nothing fancy, just thoughts. Some days I write. Today I felt invisible again. But I reminded myself, I am still here. Other days, I made soup. I folded laundry. I watched the moon rise. That's enough. Enough. That word has become my anchor. I am enough. Even when I'm tired. Even when I forget things. Even when my body aches and my clothes fit differently and I cry at commercials. I am enough because I am still showing up. Still softening. Still growing. Menopause didn't make me less. It made me more. More aware. More honest. More free. It stripped away what didn't serve me. And yes, it was painful. But what's left now feels real. If you're listening to this, and you feel like you're unraveling, please know, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're becoming. Don't rush it. Don't numb it. Feel it. Name it. And then, trust it. Trust that what's on the other side of this strange sacred chapter is not less of you, but the most true version of you. We don't talk enough about this. About how brave it is to age honestly. How sacred it is to grow into yourself, even as the world tells you to shrink. So let this be that space. Let this be a moment of recognition. A mirror held up not to judge, but to say, look at you. Still here. Still rising. Still worthy. This is not the end. This is your next beginning.